Good morning and afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Gorell, and thank you for participating in today's 1123rd Justice Clearinghouse webinar, De-escalation Techniques, How Law Enforcement is Using Technology in Their Tactical Response. Law enforcement is asked to reimagine police response to reduce incidents of force and mitigate violent confrontations with the community. During our webinar today, our presenters will cover how police agencies across the country are using drones and other technologies to contact individuals for conflict resolution, crisis intervention, and real-time intelligence to defuse tense situations while keeping first responders and the community safe. We do have three presenters today. First up is going to be Chief Patrice Andrews, who rejoined the Durham Police Department in late 2021 as Chief of Police. She previously served as the Chief of Police for the Morrisville Police Department from June 2016 until October 2021. And prior to being appointed as the Chief of Police in the town of Morrisville, Chief Andrews was the commander of the Criminal Investigations Division with the Durham Police Department. Then retired Police Lieutenant Will Hudler, who is the Vice President of Public Safety Operations at BRINC. Will served alongside the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for over 19 years. He held various positions, including in patrol, SWAT, patrol administration, and force investigations. And then is retired Police Captain Don Redmond, who has over 25 years of law enforcement experience and now works for BRINC Drones as the Vice President of Advanced Public Safety Projects. In this role, Don is focused on building future capabilities to help public safety save lives and effectively integrate UAS into communities around the world. Now, today's presentation has been done in partnership with BRINC Drones. BRINC is an American technology company set on developing and deploying technology in the service of public safety. And then the last few things I'd like to address with everyone is some basic housekeeping items. First, this event is being recorded and the formal presentation is scheduled to last about 60 minutes. It will be available to the members on the Justice Clearinghouse website. Second, this is a listen-only event, but you can type in any questions you have through the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll take as many of those questions as possible at the end of the formal presentation. Now, I do want to give you a heads up that our presenters have included 2 video clips within this presentation. The audio can only be heard through your computer speakers and will not be audible through a phone-only connection. We also have a couple of polling questions incorporated into this webinar, and you'll need to have access to your mouse to participate. And I wanted to point out that our presenters have included several handouts on de-escalation techniques that you can download from the GoToWebinar toolbar under handouts, either now or throughout the presentation. Finally, after today's webinar, there will be a follow-up survey, and we ask that you complete it. Your feedback is shared with our presenters and helps shape everything we do here at Justice Clearinghouse. With that, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to our first instructor for today. Chief Andrews, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Wow, it's great to be here today and presenting in front of all of you. My hope is that you'll take a little bit of some of the information that I will be providing and some of the observations that I have had throughout the course of my career and apply it to maybe how you are operating within your respective agencies. So let's talk a little bit about policing and law enforcement, and obviously it's changed tremendously over the last few years, specifically with COVID. And then, we had a series of protests, Black Lives Matter protests, and the shooting of Breonna Taylor and other events that have kind of been, tipping points for our profession. Prior to that, we were still experiencing the phenomenon that occurred as the effect of Ferguson, so the Ferguson effect. You all have heard about that. And so what has happened as a result is that our communities have demanded of each one of our agencies that we come up with different ways in which we go about de-escalation and dealing with our community in very tense situations. Next slide, please. So what do? We want to reimagine our police response. We want to be able to leverage resources as force multipliers, right? Gone are the days of the way we used to do no-knock warrants, and we could operate in certain ways in which to get the job done, right? We've had to shift our view and our philosophy on policing. One of the ways that we are doing that here, obviously, is by use of our drones. We have acquired drones, a drone here that our operators are utilizing during call-outs. Next slide, please. And so as we utilize drones and certain technology, we also want to keep in mind that not only is it a way that we are de-escalating, but it also helps to keep our officers safe. I don't think that I'm saying anything that each one of you have not heard or have not experienced, but our profession is inherently dangerous, right? Even now, with the access to guns, not just handguns, but very large caliber firearms, it has become more and more dangerous. And so we've had to shift away from, how are we leveraging our technology in order to keep our officers safe? I mean, recently, as you see here on the screen, the shooting deaths of officers in San Diego as well as in Philly. And we've had some other recent incidents here in particular in right next door in Raleigh. We had a mass shooting, or what was categorized as a mass shooting, that also involved the murder of a Raleigh police officer. Next, please. So let's talk about the road to police legitimacy. As you all remember, post-Ferguson, the then President Barack Obama formed this 21st century policing task force, and their marching orders was to really assess across the country how police are interacting with the community and what can be done better. And this cross-section of members of this task force came from various places within the community, whether it was our faith-based or our victim advocacy, Department of Justice, law enforcement agencies, and they all came to the table to do a kind of a tour and talk to our residents, where you are and where I am, about police interaction and what do we need to do better. And as a result, there were 6 pillars by which recommendations came through, and it ranges from training and education to officer safety and wellness, to building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, and technology and social media, as well as crime reduction through community policing. Next slide. So let's talk about de-escalation. We hear it all the time. We also hear it when we see officers that are involved in critical incidents. You can read the blogs and you can hear the words, well, we couldn't have de-escalated that better and we should be de-escalating, but really, what does it mean, right? I think that depending on who you talk to, it means different things, like the concept of community policing. But really, I think what we can all agree on is that it's an action through whether it's communicating with someone verbally, as I'm doing with each one of you, or non-verbally, during a potential force encounter in an attempt to stabilize that interaction or calm the situation, right? Ultimately, we want that situation to result in a very peaceful ending, right? As one that really allows for both sides, whether it's law enforcement and the person that we are interacting with, to walk away from the situation unscathed. We also know that de-escalation is not always successful. I do believe, and I know that many of you believe, that the officers of today know more now than we did, and I will just say myself, I'm kind of an older officer. I've been doing this for a little while. We police different. There was not de-escalation, so there was you are under arrest, and no matter what, you are coming with us, right? And so de-escalation kind of came into our discussion and into our policy making rather later on in my career. But ultimately, it's really neutralizing or lessening the intensity of the situation. Next slide, please. So what is the role of technology in de-escalation? I think when we think about and we talk about de-escalation, we always, the image of a police officer interacting with someone, right? That's the only de-escalation there is out there. But that's not true, right? So it's not just us doing these things. We are working in concert with the tools and the resources that we are given. And that, whether it be through drones or whether it be through intelligence, right? So what can we find out through the data that we have on someone? What can we find out that might help us better prepare for engaging with this person, or help us as we are engaging with this person in order to de-escalate the situation? Technology can help us gain access. It can reduce the stakes for both parties and allow us to establish and maintain contact. Next. What it isn't, right? So, you've often heard that someone that shows emotion, they are so weak, right? If you admit that you are in a bad place or a dark space, you are weak, when really that is not true. Right? It should never be considered as a weakness. Those things should never be considered as a weakness. Same thing with de-escalation. So what de-escalation is not. It doesn't mean that we back down. It doesn't mean that we tuck tail and we're going to go the other way. It doesn't mean that we're giving up. It certainly doesn't mean that we are weak on crime. I do believe that you can de-escalate and still enforce the law. And still be very strong on the oath that we all took to maintain and defend the Constitution, as well as the Constitution of each one of our states. And then also, de-escalation is not a detriment to officer safety. I would kind of push back on anyone that says otherwise. Next, please. So, pre-contact assessment. So again, you heard me kind of talk about a little bit how we use data and intelligence and certain resources that we have to really develop a profile, so to speak, assessment of the situation before contact. Oftentimes, and those of you that are operators or you work closely with operators, you know that there's a lot of preparation that goes into search warrants. There's a lot of really figuring out the what ifs and what if this happens, what if that happens. So that's really what the assessment is. What kind of call history do we have on this persons or the location? And then what tools do we have? So if we know that the door might be fortified, certainly our operators are going to be carrying those tools with them in order to get through that door. If we know that there is a potential that there could be dogs in the house, we carry certain tools for that, right? But what about those situations where we're not always able to prepare completely? So a barricaded subject, that's where for us and for my department, drones work the best. Next.
Okay, Chief Andrews, thank you for getting us started. I'm going to pop on my camera real quick, and then I'll make sure that I turn it off here after a moment. But before I move into my portion, Chief Andrews is an example of the type of police leaders that we have in this country that are not only capable, knowledgeable, but they're able to influence their folks. And I can speak from experience that you know, the effectiveness of a leader is just evident in the attitudes of the folks that they're leading, and you're doing a great job there. So we're honored to have you on this webinar with us. Okay, so you know, as it relates to making that pre-assessment, you know, I'd like to flow into this specifically from my experience, and hopefully you know, this resonates with some of you, and we really look forward to the Q&A afterwards. But you know, my genesis with or my walk essentially with leaning more heavily on drone technology from a tactical perspective began the night of our mass shooting, October 1st, 2017 in Las Vegas, right? So everyone calls it the Mandalay Bay shooting. It actually wasn't there. But, you know, being a brand new SWAT lieutenant, and, you know, that was like my third day essentially in charge of the team, I learned very quickly that it was, you know, probably always in the top 10 in terms of volume, top 10 busiest teams in America. And you know, in reading the manuals and looking at the capabilities, I learned very quickly that night that even the busiest team is deeply underserved with technology, deeply underserved, and it became obvious, right? So, you know, this led me to looking into drone technology, and as it relates to, you know, myself and Don, our involvement with BRINC drones was that we identified a company that was willing to get into the trenches with us and find out what our true problems were, right? And once I saw that, how effective that could be, once we deployed a drone inside of a structure and I realized that drone was taking gunfire from an ambush, and those bullets were not meant for a drone, but they were meant for the first person through the door in uniform, I felt like I needed to run to the mountaintop and shout it to as many tactical commanders and agency heads as I could, you know, no matter where that went. And so that led to the writing of this article in Tactical Edge, which essentially, you know, write the case for drones. And as a tactical commander, our goal before, and we'll get into this in a bit, but our goal prior to a tactical intervention, which would be, you know, officers making entry, operators making entry, is, you know, we want to exercise preclusion, and that's exhausting every single option before we go in, because as many of you know, the SWAT team responds, tactical teams respond when patrol officers are essentially out of options, you know, or they're out of tools, you know, and they can't get close enough to de-escalate things, and the tactical teams show up and they have specialized tools to get that done. Additionally, from a real perspective, you know, if the tactical intervention ends in a worst case scenario, you know, you want to be able to look people in the eye and say, I did everything, and know that you did everything you possibly could before making the decision to send people in and have a confrontation, right? So that's what drones avail. So thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that's going to lead us into our polling question. And I'll let Aaron take it.
Absolutely. And that question is where are you or your agency with your drone program? And your options are no drones, you're just starting, you're utilizing drones regularly, or you have a robust program. And we'll give folks just about another 10-15 seconds to go ahead and respond to this one. Thank you all so much for submitting your votes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out that poll here. I'm going to share the results with our presenters. All right, gentlemen and Chief, 57% indicated that they do not have any drones. 16% indicated that they're just starting. 24% said that they utilize drones regularly, and 3% indicated that they have a robust program. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. So, you know, that's pretty telling, right? When 57% of folks in public safety do not have a drone program, when the folks who have used the technology understand, obviously there's always limitations in technology, But the folks who have deployed small UASs, unmanned aircraft, have a full appreciation for the amount of intelligence that comes your way. And the goal in police leadership is always to make evidence-based decisions, right? And it's that hits you square in the face when you walk into a deposition, right? And you're asked, well, why this and why that? So we always want to make evidence-based decisions, and when you can put an eye in the sky, it's just like having an officer in the sky. And when I see that there are 57% of agencies or of folks on this that don't have it, I do believe that's indicative of, that's a good sample of what our American police agencies represent. And essentially, I learned this very quickly, and it was because nothing was purpose built for us. Right, we were the same thing that cops do everywhere in America, and as I travel the world with BRINC and meet with agencies, it's everywhere in the world. It's okay, man, we could really benefit from a drone, so let's put this drone up. Well, shoot, it would be nice to have a light on it. So so then we see officers duct taping flashlights, right, to their drones. And as I made the transition into the private sector with BRINC especially, is we have purpose-built technology in the service of public safety, and now there exists technology, and we've always had it. We've always had terrestrial robotic platforms that can make entry, and they've served us. They've served tactical teams very well, but also they come with limitations. If you see a set of stairs and you have a terrestrial robot, you're in for a long day. If you see a T-shirt on the ground, you have a terrestrial robot, you're in for a long day, or you're not going to be able to go past that. So it's very easy to defeat, and it's so deliberate in its movement that I've personally run barricades where we've had a suspect stand behind us for 4 hours, and we had no idea he was there. And he would just throw a T-shirt over our camera and play games with us while we were out there barricaded, while we had the whole neighborhood locked down and evacuated. So, always the goal on a tactical call out is, and we'll go through some of the sequence here, but you want technology that allows you to ultimately, with the goal of de-escalation, enter a structure without exposing people, without exposing officers and citizens, find suspects and folks that are inside of a structure without exposure, and be able to have additional capabilities from there. And I'm going to touch on the HOBUS numbers here in a second, but the most successful tactic in any tactical call out is two-way communication, and that's always the goal, right? So as we talk about those tactics, where does a drone fall in the progression of those tactics? Next slide, please. Is when you have a reliable indoor drone, and we'll talk about, we'll dive a little bit deeper. You have the ability to, as long as you have a breaching point, and many tactical teams have folks that are very good at removing windows and doors efficiently. You want to send either your robot or your drone in. And when we're speaking about drones, they can almost always enter a structure long before a human being in a police uniform enters that structure, right? And so essentially, anytime you're going slow, it is absolutely best practice. And I can look you in the eye and say that from personal experience, is to fly a drone in. And there's so many nuances associated with that, where you're not just flying a flying camera into a residence, right? You're inciting a response from the folks that are in there. So anytime that you have an occupied structure, whether it's a barricade, whether it's a slow warrant service, the common name now is SACO, or surround and call out, and many municipalities and counties are essentially going to that model alone to serve search warrants. Some of the recent political positions and narratives have agencies going away from the old dynamic services. As a matter of fact, the NTOA asserted about 18 months ago that the SACO, or surround and call out service, is now best practice. And then even drone first on a hostage rescue. Well, some folks may be listening to this and saying, well, that's the first thing you want in a structure, and a hostage rescue is a good actor with a firearm, right? Is to save lives. But when I'm talking about utilizing drones, this is not an idea from BRINC. This is an idea from end users who have used the BRINC lemur to fly inside, experienced the suspect's actions to the drone, and some of these teams now, to include the chief's SWAT team, are using the drones creatively, the prop noise, to mask certain tactical approaches, and other very specific tactics for hostage rescues, because you want your drone to create a stir and make some noise. You want no doubt from the person that's in the box that the police are there and that this is a police drone, right? Next slide, please. So when can a drone make entry? It's an agent of the police department, right? So when you have a signed warrant, that's obvious. And the agencies that are using drones indoor, they have boilerplate verbiage that every time they respond, whether it's negotiators that are doing the search warrant for the tactical teams, or the primary detective that's managing the case that the tactical team is serving the search warrant for, there's boilerplate verbiage to utilize unmanned aircraft in and around the curtilage of that structure. Obviously, consent; those are never overturned. And then exigency, and these are situations where the FAA is absolutely accommodating for special government interests when there's exigencies. And so these are the obvious times there's legal entry by a drone. If an officer can make entry, the drone can make entry. That's essentially a good standard to stick to. Next slide, please. So, getting to the more tactical objectives, right, and the philosophy of the tactical callouts. Obviously, we want a voluntary surrender. Oftentimes there's involuntary surrender with sort of remedial tactical intervention, whether it's the deployment of CS gas, canine bite and hold, other less lethal munitions, and then to sort of motivate folks to surrender. And then the final decision for any tactical commander is a tactical intervention, which would be manned or officers making entry to effect an arrest to someone who is obviously resisting. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So the de-escalation goals of a team, when a team is making entry in that tactical intervention, their goals are no different than the goals of an indoor drone, right? So whatever platform you're looking at, and there are plenty of drones that can be flown inside, they just weren't purpose built for tactical teams. And so obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I know that ours has taken gunfire and it has been used successfully. So you want your drone to be able to isolate your subject into a specific area. This is always something that oftentimes can take forever. We have a house, we have a single family residence that's even a single story house. Okay, well, where in the house is our person? Unless we have some sort of a line of sight through windows. And we all know that when folks are barricaded, they certainly don't leave the curtains open for us. They don't leave the blinds, and they definitely don't leave the lights on for us, right? So we want to try to isolate them to a specific area. And then once we're there, we'll contain them in a specific area. This is what the team wants. And then try to establish some sort of communication. If you're going to deploy a drone over a terrestrial robot, you want to be able to accomplish all three of these things. And so if you're looking at these drones, can the drone that you're going to deploy, can it fly in a zero light environment, right? And I've been on the receiving end of some, before I met Blake Resnick, who is the founder of this company. I've been on the receiving end of some demos, and as soon as I found out some of the drones can't fly in the dark, I mean, they were really out of the question for us, right? Once you locate, once you're able to isolate, let's say, okay, we saw movement down the hallway. Do you have to fly the drone back out, and now you have no idea where your suspect has moved to, or can you perch the drone, leave the camera running for a live feed without the drone overheating and starting a fire, right? And so we tested that, because that's an issue for us, especially in Las Vegas with the excessive heat. on top of the electronics getting hot. You don't want to add complexity by starting a fire. So can you contain them by perching and keep a long eye down a hallway, for example, or on a doorway? And then can you establish communications? And when we talk about communication, it's not just establishing communication, but obviously the FBI, we love the FBI because they push out our statistics that help inform some of our strategies. And one of those that they collect is on barricades that are all reported to them, and it's their HOBUS database essentially. And the one statistic that is striking and that allowed us to sort of push the ball over where we needed it to go, so our CFO would make the purchase of the drones for us, is that you're in the high 90th percentile. I believe it's above 96 if you're able to maintain communication. And any person that's been on a SWAT call out that's listening to this understands that you can establish here and there communication, but you live and die by the discretion of the person you're trying to communicate with. We've thrown phones in, listening devices, they throw it right back out. They can hang up the phone whenever they want. So is there a way that you can leave an open line with a very sensitive microphone and have a speaker that can be heard from 100 feet away and have two-way communication and maintain it? When you maintain comms with the person that's barricaded, you're in the 96th percentile of having no further injury when SWAT has done that. And that's saying something, because remember, the SWAT team deploys when patrol says, hey, this is too much for us to handle, and this is such a potentially violent encounter that we need some special tools and special tactics out here. So to be able to have no further injury is really saying something, and it speaks to the efficacy essentially of policing, is that we value life. We want everyone to walk away from this scenario on their own 2 feet. Next slide, please. All right, I'll pass to Aaron for polling question 2.
Fantastic. That polling question is open, and the question is, does your agency deploy drones indoors? 3 options: yes, no, and please use that third one if you're not sure. And again, we'll give folks about another 10 seconds to go ahead and respond. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. I'll share the results. And the results are 56% indicated no, 19% indicated yes, and 26% weren't sure. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Aaron. And just to speak to some of those results, so 56% no indoors, and I completely understand why. So I'm based in Las Vegas, but when I got to come up to Seattle here to our engineering headquarters for BRINC, and I got a little emotional, because many of us have friends whose pictures are on the wall from critical incidents. And we know that, just in Las Vegas, we lost an officer 3 weeks ago, and he's a good friend of mine. And I know that right now there is technology that exists that could possibly have prevented some of these deadly encounters. And me as a mid-level manager in critical incidents, I didn't really trust the technology, because there's essentially, and Chief, please feel free to jump in here, but we, purchasing new equipment and new technology for officers to integrate, and integrating the new technology is exceedingly challenging and takes a considerable amount of time. You have any comments there?
Yeah, so just alone the purchasing process, right? Because as you've heard, you want to make sure you're very diligent. You want to make the right purchase, and you don't want to have to return it because it doesn't work for you. And you also want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, because like me, you've got your bosses that you have to really be able to articulate this stuff for, the need and the reason why you have this equipment. But then finally, it is training your staff. You want to make sure that, one, you're valuing the time of your officers. I always want to make sure that training is done around my team. My team should never have to form their schedule to the training. The training should be working with the team. So yeah, it's making the right purchase, making sure that it's correct for your needs and what you are going to be using that resource for, and then making sure that training is as effective and efficient as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And so obviously there's a full appreciation for the fact that a lot goes into trying to procure equipment. And once I walked into this office here in Seattle and I saw the level of talent of the engineers that are building things now for public safety, I'm like, okay, we're finally starting to see a turn in this, because there isn't a lot of money in public safety. It takes forever for public safety to pay when things are finally purchased after they see a demonstration. And what makes Chief Andrews so unique is that these indoor drones, or drones in general, are often not what we call top-driven products, right? Top-driven products in police work are body cameras, surveillance evidence, video evidence, audio evidence, right? Those are things that police executives want to make sure that are in place so that they can tell the story to the public when critical incidents occur. And those are top-driven products. These products are usually found by the operators themselves, and they're like, wow, I think we can really save lives with this and make a difference. And they're pushing the idea up the chain, saying, hey, please buy us one of these. And then oftentimes they'll run into skepticism, like, oh, well, you just want the Gucci technology. You guys don't really need this. We've had a SWAT team for 55 years. All of a sudden now we need to fly drones inside. And I'm telling you, yes, you need to fly drones inside. Our drones, our indoor tactical drones in Las Vegas, have been shot twice. And I'm here to tell you, they were both by suspects that were lying in wait, ambushing the first thing that entered the structure. And the drones are so loud as they come in, they'll even bump walls and bump the doors, that they believed that it was a person coming in, making entry. And those are two situations where officers had an opportunity to send something else in and initiate the ambush. So one, and a ton of things now, right? So let's talk about some of the typical call out progression. So essentially, after patrol makes the request, SWAT arrives. There's like an announcement, and here we have it identified as a loud hail, but there's an announcement. Hey, we are the SWAT team. We're with the police department. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we'd like you to come out so we can talk to you, right? Once we know that we're not going to get a surrender, if you didn't already have a warrant, the warrant is going to get secured by whoever's out there with the team, who's essentially your warrant writing specialist. And then from there, like the standard practice in American tactical team policing is going to be to step up the level of presence. So oftentimes there's noise flash diversionary devices, or we call them distracts, that are thrown. And then some more announcements. Hey, we're serious. You heard those things. We're serious. We're not leaving. And then maybe even the introduction of chemical agents now, right? And now we own it. Now we're using force. We own that situation. And then from there, you start to take away the safety blanket of the person. When I say take away the safety blanket, if they're locked up in a box, whether it's a house, apartment, a van, or even an open field, and their safety blanket is distance, right? You start to take some of that away, and to let them know, okay, you are vulnerable. We can come in and get you, but we don't want to. We'd like you to just come out, right? And oftentimes those communications are made over a PA system, right? Because for us in the past, to insert a two-way communication device like a throw phone, we would literally have to shield the team up to a door, strap it to a carpet dolly, and try to roll it down the hallway, not having any idea where your suspect is. So that usually the insertion of a two-way throw phone is much later into the operation once you have someone isolated. Well, so what do we do then? We'll search with a terrestrial robotic platform. Some folks use throw robots. Some folks use bomb robots, and there's very reliable robots that are run by the bomb team. Sometimes SWAT folks are the operators are the ones that are operating these things. But every time you introduce a new piece of technology, you're inciting a response, hopefully from the person in the box, because you want a response. The non-responders are always the most dangerous ones. You want to incite a response, and you want to try to isolate. So if that doesn't create incite a response, and then eventually hour 18, hour 28, or hour 38, if you have no response, how long are you going to keep the city at bay and keep everybody locked down? You're going to start removing walls, and we have some operational video for you later. You're going to start removing not just doors and windows, you're going to start removing walls and injecting more gas. You can't remove too many walls, right, and too many windows, otherwise now the gas is ineffective because it just dissipates, right? So all of these considerations are coming in, and all with the priority of hostages and innocents, not exposing the officers, because remember, and this is not in particular order, but understand that when the suspects are safe, when the officers are safe, so are the suspects. When the officers can be behind cover and still have distance, then everyone is safe. Because oftentimes when a SWAT team is forced to be in a gunfight, they're going to win. They're going to win that gunfight, right? So because they're very well trained, they're very proficient at their tactics. Next slide, please. So enter the drone, right? Imagine being able to send up a ground robot, to placing an energetic breaching charge on that door, removing the door. And let's say the door's at the top flight of steps and it's a brownstone or something. You can't get the robot to the door. Imagine being able to fly a drone up that can breach the window itself and make entry, right? So what we're using drones for is making initial entry. And it's not just that. So once we establish containment, we're flying over the curtilage. We'll put up a Overwatch drone that has GPS services. We'll lock that thing in place, and it'll be our eye in the sky. It's additional situational awareness for all of the decision makers and for the team. It causes us to be more analytical and more deliberate in our approach. And then once we have the eye in the sky up, we'll launch our indoor drone. And in Las Vegas, that's going to be a BRINC Lemur S. And that indoor drone is not just flying around looking at the house. It is going underneath vehicles that are parked in the driveway. We're talking about confined spaces. That's why you don't want an indoor drone that is restricted by GPS. You'll be able to fly underneath the car. You clean up the cars in the front. Now you're going to the rear. When you fly in the rear, all of a sudden you'll be able to tell your rear containment, hey, you guys have a gap right here. Let's fill that gap. You just have more eyes on the situation. The tactical team is seeing it. You can stream this thing to the chief of police while this whole operation is occurring if you have the right video management systems in your ecosystem out there. You can clear up sheds, RVs that are on the property before you start focusing and making your smaller area search. We're breaching, we're isolating areas, and then once we decide how we're going to take the structure with the drones, almost like we do as people, because we're inventing now indoor tactics for drones. And then we're launching a second drone. And we're using one drone to keep a long eye, connecting our cell phones so we can talk to folks if we see them in there. And we're almost bounding with these drones to tactically sweep these residences. And I don't want to, or these structures, and I don't want to say they're clear, because we all know that it's not clear until a human being says it is. But we're sweeping these structures, and it's also lowering the levels of anxiety. And retired Captain Don Redmond can speak to this, can speak to how, and Don, if you would please, how the presence of drones, whether Overwatch or indoor, can lower the levels of anxiety for officers that are on scene or responding. Oh, we got to unmute you, Don.
Thanks. I have some history. I managed the Drone as a First Responder program for my former agency and spent 3 years doing that. And when you talk about using drones and technology for de-escalation, it is a complete game changer. So typical situations, you can launch a drone ahead of first responders, and you get it over the head, get them overhead well before the officers ever get there, and you can live stream that video back to the first responders. So 25% of the time when the drone was launched, we did not need to send officers ground units. And when you talk about de-escalation, the idea that it's the paramount of de-escalation when you don't even have to send officers to a call for service. And we've all heard these national tragedies where, you know, a person calls in and says, hey, you've got this person who's standing on the corner, he's screaming at cars, he's acting crazy, you need to send officers to them. Well, what would happen is, you know, typically around the country, we would send officers, right? And we would make contact, and then that situation would escalate, and then the next thing we know, we have a national tragedy or force is used, and then our tactics are called into question. Now, if you can launch a drone and get overhead and monitor that person from a safe distance and say, that person is not committing a crime and they're not a danger to themselves or others, there's no reason for us to send officers there. So we would just cancel that call, and we did respond. We noted that there was no problems, and now the officers are free up to do something differently. So when we talk about de-escalation, using technologies and drones is really shifting it, that real-time information for better informed decisions, and it's the way to go.
All right, thank you for that, sir. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass to Aaron to play the video for you. Oh, I lost you.
Yep, I've got the
Okay.
video all set up, folks. Once again, if you're connected through a phone-only connection, you're not going to hear the audio on this one. I know we're getting close on our time for this webinar. This one's only 35 seconds long. Here we go.
I think my
And yeah, so I want to give you some context there. Aaron, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I sure can.
All right, perfect. I want to give you some context there for the viewers. So essentially what we have is operational footage. And this is a lemur deployment. We're going to go into another video here in a second, but essentially you have a county in the Midwest that did not have an indoor drone. And they were on this barricade with an armed assailant who was firing rounds from the residents. And they didn't have access to a drone to the lemur, right? So they tried a couple of smaller drone platforms. They lost them very quickly. You can see how treacherous it is in here. But before this, they had, you know, again, I told you that we were going to remove doors, remove windows, and start to remove walls. And that's what had happened. And then some folks on that team said, hey, the big city next to us has this drone that they fly inside on barricades that can have two-way communication. Let's call them out. So the neighboring SWAT team came over, they deployed their lemur, and this was one of their assessment flights. So the idea is you want to clean up the rooms as you see them after you clean up the curtilage, and then locate your subject of that response and try to establish two-way communication, because again, that's your highest probability of success. So can you play the next video, please?
All right, folks, and this next video is a little bit longer, but do note there's no audio with it. It's about 1:43. Here we go.
Aaron, can you hear me now? Because I'd like to narrate a little bit while this is going.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so now what you see is there's actually a subject in that chair, and a couple things happened as the drone made entry into that breach point. There's drywall hanging. The drone hit the drywall, and the drywall didn't take it down. That is something that we've never experienced, tactical teams have ever experienced with their previous drone deployments. A robust platform that won't get taken down by standard hazards that are within the residence. You've seen that it bumped a curtain. The curtain didn't take the drone down because the pilot was aware of that, so gave it some space. And now you're going to see here in a second, you're going to see the drone perch, keep eyes on the suspect. So now you have a ton of information and evidence to start making decisions. They know, they've confirmed that now he's up there. The drone was able to see the suspect's hands, right? See that there's no victim in that room. So if they had to effect a rescue, they can do a limited penetration on the bottom level, effect a rescue, and move out and exit with anyone they had to rescue, or do a limited penetration in that structure to take the person into custody. So there's so many things that are going on here, just in the ability to see that, make that observation. And I know we are getting low on time because I'm extremely long-winded, but I do want to jump to a few slides. Don, if you can jump to the UAS team versus SWAT team slide before I pass it on to you, and then I'll pass it on to you, sir. All right, cool. So who's going to fly your indoor drones, right? The advantage of having your own drone team fly the drone is that essentially they may have more time to train drone-specific operations, whereas the tactical team may not. So there may be more operational flight time when it comes time for them to actually fly. They'll probably have access to a myriad of platforms that the SWAT team is not necessarily concerned about, that can add value to the mission, and they just don't know about them. And UAS teams oftentimes are used to working with partnering agencies because of COAs, certificate of authorizations, right? Next slide, please. And the disadvantages are, how often does the UAS team actually train on SWAT deployments? Do they know some of the rules of engagement when the SWAT team has locked down the inner perimeter? All of those things can come into play. We experienced some of those growing pains in Las Vegas, where I had drone pilots running across the sniper's line of sight, just because he was trying to do something that he felt needed to be done, and next thing I know, the sniper's coming over the radio saying, "Hey, who is this guy?" Right? So, and essentially, also once they've identified it, do they have a good grasp of how communications are done? And so, if you're going to have a UAS team fly for the tactical team, they need to train together, just like the chief mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And the advantage of your SWAT team flying, right? So this is actually a picture of a North Las Vegas SWAT operator flying the lemur on a search warrant. And as you see, the team is looking at his teammates are looking at his transmitter, because it becomes the most important thing at the moment. And so response time. So the drone shows up with the SWAT team. That's the advantage. You don't have to wait for someone else. The data or the video evidence is being ingested by tactical operators, so it speeds up the progression of tactical decision making, because you eliminate a third party. The SWAT operators know exactly what to look for, and then if they do make contact and get a response and maintain the communications, they know exactly what to communicate immediately, because they understand the tactical plan more intimately than a drone pilot would, right? Next slide. And then your disadvantages. Obviously, they're going to have to commit to training time for flying inside. It's a whole different specialty, and that's what we've seen with BRINC. Is our customers have created a new specialty within their team, and so it's something that they've got to practice. And then, are you short-staffed? Are you going to be using a breacher, a sniper, a less lethal munitions person, assistant team leader to be flying this drone? So you could chew up some of your staffing. And then with that, Don, I don't want to eat up the entire hour here. I'd like to pass it to you so you can start your portion. Are you good with that?
Absolutely. We'll get in there, and fortunately for a lot of this, we are going to be doing. I'll be doing another webinar focused on specifically on starting a UAS program and the ethical landmines when considering to start this. So I'm sorry, and I'm just kind of fast forwarding this, but a lot of this is where we're going to get into understanding. We didn't want this just to be a UAS drone webinar, we wanted to talk de-escalation, and the whole purpose is the understanding of how do we get communication with a person and do it safely. And one way of doing it, obviously, is with the drone, being able to launch the drone, fly it in, and then purchase and have a conversation. And it was interesting during one of these training missions, and we were showing the drone to an agency. One of the supervisors said, could you take that cell phone and just put it in like a ball or something so that we can just throw it? And we thought, wow, that's a good point. And then when we rolled this out, we hear a lot of agencies say, well, what we've had to do in the past is put like a cell phone and a Nerf football and try and throw it through a window and then have that person answer the phone and talk to them. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to give first responders the ability to have quick ease to a basically just a throw phone, a simple to use throw phone, so that you can gain communications with somebody who maybe doesn't want to talk to you. So when we looked at this, we talked about, hey, we'll talk about the FBI statistics that, hey, when you're able to get communications with people, you have a better chance of having a positive resolution with no injuries to anybody. So, and that doesn't mean just with SWAT, that is just in the everyday communications that you have as a first responder. So with this, we developed this idea, this BRINC ball. It's just a throw phone in a softball type of a structure, a hard plastic that maybe you have somebody who's in crisis, that's threatening suicide with a weapon in their bedroom, and you don't want to, obviously you don't want to make entry, you don't want to force it, you don't want to escalate the situation, but you don't want to be very close, right? You want that time and distance away from the person. So the idea is you just take this ball, which is very simple. It's just a cell phone. You turn it on, you throw the ball into wherever you need to do it, and you call it. It's just a simple phone number, and then it has a speaker and a microphone that the person doesn't have to answer. They don't have to, you don't have to use a bullhorn to tell them, hey, pick up the phone, pick up the phone. It's very audible from a distance. You use your cell phone, just call them, and now they can't hang up on you. It's just there. There's no cameras or anything in there, so you don't have to deal with some of the legal issues that different states have when deploying cameras inside of a residence. This is just an audible throw phone to help with your de-escalation. We built it to make sure that it lasts, that you can throw it through a second-story window. And it's pretty funny when you talk about some of the people probably in here know that officers were terrible at throwing things through windows. SWAT team were the worst ones. It usually takes 2 or 3 times. We built the ball that if it misses the first or second time and bounces, you're able to pick it up and throw it again and make it through the window. Simple to use. You just unwind it. You have to have a tool. You take off the top, you just turn it on. It's got a SIMS card in there that you can plug in, drop your SIMS card from whatever agency that you're using, or we can provide that for you. And the best thing also is that if you have the ability to use Calio or lets it, the third party where it live streams it out to your team, or your supervisors or whatever, you're able to integrate this simply with the different third-party vendors on that. And with that, Aaron, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We want to thank you for this and see if there's any questions that we can answer for you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for a great presentation. I love the creativity that clearly BRINC, Chief Andrews, that you're engaging in to look at different ways to address and de-escalate situations. Thank you all so much for sharing. Folks, if you do have questions for any of our presenters, now's the time to get them into the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll get to as many as we can in the roughly next 15 minutes. And Captain Redmond mentioned this, but his next webinar is on March 14th, when he'll be talking about avoiding ethical landmines, gaining acceptance of your UAS program. If it sounds like a webinar you might be interested in, go to the Justice Clearinghouse website. Up on the menu bar, select webinar schedule, and again, you'll find that event on March 14th. Okay, if y'all are ready, I'd love to start working our way through these questions. Our first one is specifically for Chief Andrews. Chief, what callouts does Durham PD respond to automatically with a drone?
So anything involving a barricaded subject, so anything where we know that there is a high likelihood of the unknown. So you've heard me kind of talk about at the very beginning, you know, it's not the known that I'm more concerned about the unknown, and so definitely drone deployments in that. Depending upon the situation with the pre-planned search warrants, drone deployment would be feasible for that as well, but definitely the unknown stuff.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Okay, next question is I believe it was you, Lieutenant Hudler. Earlier you mentioned using drone prop noise to distract. Can you talk a little bit about that technique?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, we've had some feedback from end users where, like, one example was at a police department in Indiana. It's still an open investigation, so I won't give too many details. But essentially, they had a barricaded person that was like in the second story of this single-family house, and the window faced the front of the home. And they made entry with the drone. They cleaned up the bottom level. They went upstairs, and as the drone was kind of working its way down the hallway and bumping the walls and all the prop noise and blowing things around that were on the floor, the suspect actually thought the team had made entry, and he jumped out the top of the second story window and was injured. And the first claim that he made to the investigators that were debriefing him was that, hey, why did your SWAT team throw me out the window, right? And they showed him the 1080p video that was on board the lemur, and they said, hey, it wasn't the team never touched you. You sure you want to stick to that statement, right? So that was one. And then, you know, some teams right now in different jurisdictions, and I've seen it firsthand, are using the prop noise to mask approaches on hostage rescues. And essentially, you know, it's not unlike the tactics that are already being used. So I'm not letting the cat out of the bag here, essentially. But on a hostage rescue, the distraction devices are very valuable, right? To disorient your hostage taker before a tactical intervention. And what drones do is they give you one more option as a distraction device to help draw the attention of your hostage taker, right? So that's, those are just a couple of examples of how the drone has incited a response from a suspect and how it's been used intentionally to incite the response now.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, next question is from Maureen. Maureen says, regarding de-escalation goals, we have isolate, contain, and then what was the third item she's asking?
Communicate. But you want to communicate with the isolate, contain, and then communicate.
That's correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, next question comes from Terry. Terry wants to know, does BRINC have the technology on your throw phone similar to the old Remington eyeball that included an IR camera?
I'll answer that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Will. You got it.
Okay, yeah. So no, there's again, the question was about, is there a camera on the ball? Is that right, Aaron?
Yeah, I think maybe they are specifically asking about whether there's an IR camera on the ball.
Yeah, no, there isn't. And the goal for the ball is the same goal for the drone. So you'll notice on the drone it has a fixed camera. It's because if in a perfect world we could have a gimbal on that thing, but the gimbal would break inside of a structure. And so with the ball, because it's being thrown in sometimes from extreme angles and bouncing on concrete, and that the goal is, okay, how do we encase a two-way communication tool that's as robust as possible? And very difficult to do that, to have a camera and two-way communication. And so it really is, obviously you can use the drone with, you can use the ball without a drone inside, but it's really ideal to have the ball deployed in one side of the structure and have a drone perched in the other side of the structure. So you have essentially with the drone, you have a flying camera. Because what we learned in the SWAT world, and a lot of you know this, is that the suspects like to be mobile. They like to keep you guessing where they are. So specifically to answer your question, durability was the focus. So for now, it's a two-way communication device, because the two-way communication device is the statistic that we should all be aiming to achieve, is to maintain two-way comms.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, next question is for Chief Andrews. What kind of training do you recommend at a minimum when introducing drone technology to either a tactical team or to your overall patrol unit?
So that's a great question. First, what I would say is make sure that you get all of the training that's required. I would never do the minimum training. Depending on where you are, there are certain FAA rules that you have to follow, certain federal training and certifications that you have to have. And so let me just tell you what we did for our team. One of our operators who primarily brought the idea of utilizing the lemur for tactically utilizing, he brought that forward, but also included the price of the training, of all the trainings that we would need to fully deploy, right? So we want to make sure that you're not doing a basic foundation training, because that legally is not going to work for you if there is a situation where you have to deploy the drone and then there's something else that happens. So I'm putting on my administrator hat now. You always want to make sure that you're training and obtaining all of the necessary certifications as quickly as possible upon the arrival of your drone. So you will obviously do some training with BRINC, just a getting to know you training. And then there are separate certifications that are rather quick. We now have 3 of our operators now that are fully trained and can now operate the drone in any space and know what they need to do in order to be able to operate those drones in those spaces. We are very close to Raleigh-Durham Airport. There's also a jail not too far from us, so there are certain rules. But I would say to you, don't do the foundational training. Go ahead and schedule and make sure you're very detailed and diligent about knowing when you're going to go and get that training. Include it into your budget for that drone so that you can get it all done at one time.
Fantastic, Chief. Thank you so much. Okay, we've got a couple of questions about indoor drones. David would like to know, what large agencies do you see deploying indoor de-escalation drones currently?
Yes, so I can speak to that, but the way we met, obviously Durham is deploying drones indoor. The way BRINC as a company met Don Redmond in the first place is that they became customers, and their team deploys drones indoors. We're pushing about 200 agencies. We're cresting about 200 right now, and the company's been in business for just short of 2 years, which is remarkable, because I'll tell you what happens. And instead of giving you a list, I think we have an agency easily in every state, multiple agencies in every state in the union right now, and a few overseas. But what happens is, because we have a team of trainers that goes out to demonstrate these, and it's essentially like, look, this is what you can avoid with a tool like this. And there's such a visceral response from the folks that are there, because oftentimes they'll think of a person who may still be around if they had this technology. And I had been on the receiving end of a lot of product demonstrations in the past, and was like, okay, yeah, maybe that could help, but man, what's it going to take to integrate that and to get our CFO to write the check for it, and then also replacement plans and training people and training a specialist. But what happens with this is we'll go out for a product demonstration. There'll be 2 or 3 agencies who show up, And 100% of the time, one of those agencies will say, we want one. And I've never seen that. And the reason why we've had such great adoption of the product is because it was designed by cops. We had a brilliant engineer attach himself to our unit. He went out on 24 call outs as he built this thing. We went forgiveness over permission. You know, our former sheriff, Joe Lombardo, was just elected governor, and he had no idea we were bringing an 18-year-old kid out on call outs. And because cops can be mischievous at times, but also we want to help, we want to do a better job. So we snuck him out, and he developed this product for American SWAT teams. And I'll speak to something that to Chief Andrews' response previously. All the teams that buy the lemur are trained by BRINC staff, by a law enforcement public safety professional that's a member of BRINC staff. So we'll either come out for free for a day, stay extra if you want to get more reps on the following day, or the agencies, like much like Durham, they can put their operators through a 3-day post-certified. Now I know post is not prevalent in every state, but it's post-certified in the state of Nevada, and we haven't had any students get pushback on getting reciprocity for the 24 hours of training. And they'll go through the 3 days and they leave feeling like, I can fly the drone on a mission right now. And El Segundo did this. El Segundo, California, they came for training. They finished training on Thursday. On Monday morning, there was a robbery of an armored truck in Gardena, California. Gardena says, hey, didn't you guys just get trained up on that drone? Yep, we're en route. They fly the lemur, they clear an entire casino. A brand new pilot cleared an entire casino after 3 days of training. So we're really proud of the training offerings that we have. And more specifically, agencies all over America are flying drones indoors, and at least 200 of them are flying lemurs.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that information, and what a great service. Our last question goes to Jason. It's another indoor drone question. I love this one. Jason says, the one indoor drone I've seen in action was not super great outside in an environment with wind, etc. Is that common, and is that a big issue to look for when purchasing?
I can start, and then if Don, you want to take, or the chief, you want to jump in. The reason we didn't buy a drone initially is because the demos we had were in Vegas in the spring. No one wants to come out in the summer and show us stuff. But in the spring, it's very windy in Las Vegas. And so the things we tried to fly inside wouldn't even make it to the front door. And that was something we told Blake, our CEO, when he was riding with us, was like, hey man, this thing's got to get to the door in the first place. It's got to get to the structure from behind cover. And our pilots right now fly from about 5 houses away around the corner. Many agencies are deploying it with their pilot at the armored vehicle or Bearcat. But the lemur has, the top speed is 50 miles an hour. So I've seen the drone. I've seen a law enforcement pilot break a window in Utah with 35-mile-an-hour winds with the lemur. So you definitely want to make sure that your drone can get to the house in the first place. If you're having to expose human beings to shield up, to place a drone within the threshold just to get it in there, I don't know that it's the right platform for you, because you're not necessarily mitigating risk. If you're going to send people up to the door, we all know as tactical commanders, like that's what you're trying to avoid. And so that's definitely something you should look for. Can it get to the structure in the first place in high winds or rain, for that matter? Our lemur it meets the same internal. So internally we've tested it. It meets the same standard as IP24, and we also flew it at the Surfside building collapse. Miami-Dade, who also flies these drones, he's a mentor of mine, the lieutenant down there, he reached out and was like, hey, do you think Blake would come down and help us search these buildings? I said, absolutely. I said, just give him a call. So he calls the CEO directly. Blake flies out with a team of pilots, and they fly the lemur through the Surfside building collapse. The drone was completely submerged in water and flew out of the water. So you definitely want a drone that can withstand the elements.
Fantastic. All right, Don, I'm looking at your microphone to see if you want to weigh in on that one at all. Go ahead.
No, he said it exactly. Your drone, your indoor drone, yes, it may be focused on indoor, but if you can't fly it outside to get it indoors, then I would keep looking for a different platform.
Great, thank you for a great summary. All right, one last question I would like to ask. If someone wants to get more information about BRINC, about your drones, about the throwable phone, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it just through the website, or is there an email, or what's the best approach?
Yeah, listen, brinkdrones.com is the best, that's the best single resource to get all the information you need. So it's all one word, BRINCDRONES.com. The history of the company, what we're about, our mission, saving lives, everything's on there. So that's the best resource.
Fantastic. Chief Andrews, Don, Will, thank you all so much for your presentation today, folks. If you're not able to find contact information or find the website, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to put you in contact with any of our presenters. And with that, this concludes this morning's Justice Clearinghouse webinar. Take care, everyone, and please stay safe. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.